They say not to let your job define you. But when you're a divorced woman in your 40s raising twins and clawing your way back after losing everything, it feels less like identity and more like survival. I'm Danielle Reyes, 42, and until 5 days ago, I was the lead innovation architect at Vanguard North, a tech consultancy in Denver that liked to call itself visionary. What they didn't like, giving credit where it was due. I was the architect behind the proposal that secured the $22 million 0-cents Darrowtech deal, their largest partnership to date. But if you check the records, you won't find my name anywhere near it. This is just business, my boss, Evan Marsden, had said, sliding the termination papers toward me like a bar tab. We're restructuring, nothing personal. But to me, it felt like being gutted. The room reeked of citrus-scented cleaner and corporate betrayal. Snow dusted the windows outside, and the hum of the heater was the only sound after he spoke. I sat, stunned, unable to move. After 6 years of strategizing late into the night, missing birthdays and solving messes the execs couldn't touch, I was being erased. "I'm sorry, Danielle," Evan offered, eyes fixed on his Rolex. "We need new perspectives." No. What he needed was a scapegoat, and a clean slate to take full credit for my work. I stood slowly, schooling my face into composure. He waited, clearly expecting a breakdown. But I had nothing left to give him. Not tears, not rage. "Thanks for the insight," I said coolly. I didn't ask why my name was stripped from the Darrowtech proposal. I already knew. I'd finalized the pitch myself just 3 weeks ago. Data models, risk assessments, every line of strategic direction. The day before I went live, I found the version on Evan's desk. My name had vanished. "Just procedure," he said then, waving me off. "You'll be credited internally." I didn't argue. I should have. But he had no idea. I'd already sent myself a time-stamped copy of the real strategy file. Just in case. Now I was being walked out by a junior HR rep I barely recognized. My belongings, framed photos, a few notebooks, a coffee mug that said "She builds, she leads," were stuffed into a cardboard box. My key card was already deactivated. My inbox, wiped. The walk to the parking structure felt longer than usual. I sat behind the wheel of my Subaru, the cold from the steering wheel seeping into my fingers. I didn't cry. I couldn't. My chest was too tight to let anything out. It wasn't just the layoff. It was knowing I'd handed Evan Marsden my best work on a silver platter, and I'd known better. That's what hurt most. Driving home, through slush-covered streets, windshield wipers dragging over ice, I thought about my twins, Luca and Mira. About tuition. About the orthodontist bill I kept ignoring. About the client presentations I'd prepped, while heating up frozen dinners. The bedtime stories I'd traded for analytics reports. I thought about the time Evan had sneered, "You're smart, Danielle, but you don't have killer instinct." He was wrong. That night, with snow piling against the windows of my apartment in Denver's Highland District, I opened my personal laptop. I logged into my encrypted archive, the one no one at Vanguard North knew about. It had everything: drafts, revision logs, metadata. Including the original mind map titled Darrowtech Predictive Expansion Model //D Reyes //11:03 p.m. I didn't save it all to be vengeful. I saved it because I believed in protecting what I built. And what Evan didn't know? The new CEO of Darrowtech was Anjali Verma, someone I'd helped launch her first product back in 2015. She once said to me, "The builders always get buried, but not if I'm in the room." She owed me nothing, but I owed myself a shot. Her name was still pinned in my contacts. I clicked compose. Subject: the real author of your proposal. The email started with, "You may not remember me, but..." I hesitated, then hit send. In that moment, everything changed. At least I hadn't vanished quietly, like they expected me to. That night, I lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, the glow of streetlights casting soft shadows across my bedroom. From the living room, I could hear Luca's quiet breathing. He'd fallen asleep waiting for me to come out and eat dinner. I hadn't told the twins yet, not until I had something solid. Not until I knew which way the ground would shift next. At 7:02 a.m., my phone buzzed. Anjali Verma. Danielle, I absolutely remember you. I still use the segmentation model you built for our Series A round. Thank you for reaching out. Let's talk. I have questions and an opportunity you might want to hear about. Anjali. I sat up so fast I nearly knocked over my coffee. This wasn't just a polite reply. Anjali was a rising force in the tech world now. The newly appointed CEO of Darrowtech, known for integrity, precision, and refusing to play politics. I called her that afternoon. Her assistant patched me through instantly. Danielle. Anjali's voice was calm but laser-focused. I've reviewed the documents you sent. There was a pause. I held my breath. And I'm beery. I steadied my voice. I wanted you to know, the person who pitched the proposal didn't create it. I did. Of course you did, she said without hesitation. I recognized your structuring style instantly. It's too clean, too layered to be Evans. She fired off questions about revenue sensitivity, implementation timelines, risk layers. I didn't hesitate. I didn't need notes. It was my work. Every line, every model, every diagram. I owned it. Finally, she said, I'm terminating the contract with Vanguard North, effective immediately. My heart slammed into my chest. You're sure? I don't do business with thieves, she said. Then softer, but I don't believe in letting brilliant work get wasted. She paused, then added, we're launching a new division. I want you to lead it. As partner and CEO, it's yours if you want it. I blinked. You've always had a mind for building, Danielle. Now it's time you had the space to lead. And if you're ready to see what happens when the underestimated finally take the lead, don't forget to subscribe. The next chapter of this story is one you won't want to miss. I can give you that, Anjali said, but I need an answer quickly. I want to hit the ground running. I paused, staring at the Denver skyline beyond my apartment window. Me, CEO. I need to think about it, I said quietly, though my heart had already made the decision. I understand, she replied, but don't take too long. You deserve more than a footnote in someone else's story. The line disconnected, and I sat frozen, the phone still in my hand. CEO, after all these years, I thought of every late night I spent perfecting someone else's vision, of how often my insights were passed off as team contributions, of the words Evan said before firing me, this is how the real world works. Maybe it did, until someone like me decided it wouldn't anymore. That evening, I sat on the bed beside Mira, who curled up in her oversized hoodie, her eyes wide and searching. They fired you? She asked, barely above a whisper. They did, I said, brushing her hair gently. But it's okay, something better might be coming. Are you scared? She asked. Yes, I said honestly. But I'm also ready. The next morning I called Anjali. I'm in. Good, she said, her voice sure. Your new title is CEO Verma Strategies. I've already filed the paperwork. 2 hours later, the news hit the wires. The Darrowtech terminates Vanguard contract amid ethics concerns. Sources said the firm was blindsided. I couldn't help but smile. I imagined Evan's face as he read the headline. But it didn't stop there. The next day, his assistant emailed Darrowtech, desperate to set up a damage control call. Anjali simply forwarded it to me. He wants to talk to the CEO, your move. So when the call finally came through and I heard Evan's voice, tight, anxious, I sat up straight, took a breath, and said, This is Danielle Reyes. You're speaking with the new CEO. There was a pause, then shallow breathing. Danielle, he stammered, I wasn't expecting you. I figured, I said, keeping my voice steady. You were trying to reach the CEO of Verma Strategies? That's me now. There was a strained chuckle on the other end, the kind people use when they realize the ground has shifted under their feet. Danielle, this feels like a big misunderstanding. I had no idea there was tension between you and Vanguard. If I'd known you were still involved, I would have handled things differently. I let the silence stretch, deliberately. You didn't know? I repeated slowly. You removed my name from the Darrowtech proposal. You presented my work as your own, then you fired me. But sure, you didn't know there was a problem? His voice turned defensive. The board was pressuring us. Cuts had to be made. You know how these things go. And frankly, he added, you're a talented architect, Danielle, but you were never leadership material. It hit me harder than it should have. Not because I believed him, but because I'd heard it before. Too reserved, too analytical, too focused. Always too much. And still never enough. You're making a mistake, he pressed on, not just by walking away. You're burning bridges. Think long term. Think about your kids. That was the moment it shifted. You don't get to mention my children, I said, my tone controlled. And I'm not burning bridges, I'm building them. There was a long pause, then a sigh. You used to be? Different. You used to be grateful. That word, grateful, like everything I earned, was charity. I wasn't grateful, I said. I was loyal. But that ended the moment you made me disposable. And Evan? I'm not the one who should be worried about the future. You are. I ended the call. Later that day, I met Anjali at her office downtown. Glass walls, clean lines, views stretching across snowy Denver. But what struck me wasn't the space. It was the energy. People weren't just showing up, they belonged there. So did I. It felt alive. You handled that perfectly, Anjali said, after I told her about the call with Evan. But, brace yourself, people like him, they don't go quietly. She was right. By Thursday, the rumors started swirling. First on LinkedIn, then through Slack threads and internal back channels I still had friends in. Evan was already spinning a new narrative. That I'd left Vanguard North voluntarily, that I'd underperformed, that I was bitter, unstable, difficult to manage. It was so familiar, so exhausting, so predictable. That afternoon I pulled up everything. Emails, performance reviews, project logs. For 6 years I'd quietly archived every milestone, every deliverable, every documented moment of impact. Not because I thought I'd need them, but because I was the kind of woman who always kept receipts. That night, I got a message from Tasha, a former colleague. Danielle, I don't know if you've seen what's being said, but I've got your back. We all know the truth, and if you ever need a witness, I'm in. She wasn't the only one. By the weekend, I had over a dozen messages from former coworkers. Some were still at Vanguard, others had left long ago, carrying their own battle scars. Credit taken, promotions stolen, ideas dismissed. You were the first to leave, Tasha said. But now that you have, some of us are ready. By Sunday night, I didn't just have support. I had evidence, screenshots, slap threads, redacted memos, whispers forming a storm. And the best part? I didn't need to use any of it. Because Vanguard North's board was already shaking. On Monday morning, their investors' site posted an urgent update. The Darrowtech contract was terminated. Revenue forecasts were slashed. Stock values slid 6% by noon. And then an email I never expected. Danielle. This is off the record, but the board has opened an internal investigation into executive conduct. There's talk of a leadership transition. You didn't just walk away. You exposed what we all chose to ignore. Anonymous. I read the email 3 times before closing my laptop. My hands? Steady now. Evan said I'd made a mistake. But it was starting to look like the real mistake was staying loyal for as long as I did. By the next week, the whispers had become headlines. Top tech consultancy loses flagship client amid scandal. Vanguard North in crisis after leadership fallout. I watched from my home office, coffee in hand, as the notifications poured in. My phone lit up every few minutes with updates, DMs, news alerts. Each ping felt like quiet vindication. Not because I wanted revenge, but because the truth, the same truth they tried to bury me with, was clawing its way to the surface. At Vermeer Strategies, momentum was building fast. Anjali and I were handpicking a team of brilliant, ethical, razor-sharp minds. Some had left Vanguard North right after I did. Others came through Anjali's network. But all of them had one thing in common. They were ready to build something better, cleaner, smarter. For the first time in years, I wasn't executing someone else's vision. I was designing the blueprint. Still, a part of me stayed alert. Evan wasn't the type to vanish quietly. That Friday, my attorney, Dana McKinley, called. "You're not going to love this," she said flatly. "Go ahead," I said, already bracing. "Vanguard just filed a cease and desist. They're accusing you of using proprietary data to poach their client and launch your firm." Did it not because it was funny, but because of how utterly predictable it was. "You mean the client whose strategy I wrote, whose growth model I designed, who was my professional contact before I ever joined Vanguard?" Dana snorted. "Exactly. It's a scare tactic. They want you to panic, or better yet, fold." "Let them try," I said. "We documented everything." "We did," she confirmed. "And we're not just defending. We're filing a countersuit. Defamation, wrongful termination, misrepresentation, and yes, we already have witness statements, signed and dated." I leaned back, eyes on the Denver skyline beyond my window. A month ago, I was just surviving. Now I was reclaiming my name and rewriting the ending. But what surprised me most wasn't how fast things escalated. It was how many people showed up for me. Like Nathan, a senior strategist I'd mentored during my time at Vanguard North. He messaged late that night. "Danielle, I've been quiet too long. I knew what Evan was doing. We all did. You were the engine behind every successful strategy. We just watched him take credit." Attached is a timeline showing when your name was removed from internal records. Every edit, every version. Use it if you need to. Then came Alicia, a former HR rep who'd left 6 months before I did. "Evan pressured us to change your performance evaluations the quarter before you were let go," she wrote. "You were rated exceeds expectations. It was altered to meets." They were laying the groundwork. Even though I'd suspected, seeing it confirmed still hurt. Not because I believed their lies, but because they'd been so intentional. They hadn't just dismissed me. They'd erased me. But now, piece by piece, I was reclaiming what they tried to bury. Dana wasted no time. Within days, she filed our legal response, complete with screenshots, original proposal drafts, archived email chains with Anjali, and signed witness statements from 5 former colleagues. The cease and desist was dropped within 48 hours. No explanation, no apology. Now, just silence. And that silence? That was the clearest confession of all. The following week, Anjali and I presented our official launch deck to a group of impact investors. Our pitch was simple. A strategy firm founded by women, grounded in ethics, committed to building sustainable success, not just flashy quarterly wins. The room crackled with energy. By that afternoon, we'd secured 2 contracts. As I rode the elevator down, I felt pride, relief, and a quiet grief for all those years I spent waiting for permission to lead. I used to think the system was unshakable. But the truth is, the people doing the work hold the whole thing up. And when they walk away, the structure starts to fall. That evening, I picked up Mira from school. She climbed in, smiling that wide, no-holding-back smile. "How was your day?" I asked. "My teacher asked, 'Who inspires us?'" she said. I said, "You." I glanced over, throat tight. "Why me?" "Because you didn't let them stop you," she said proudly. "And now you're the boss." I smiled, eye stinging in my eyes, not just because Mira saw me, but because, for the first time in a long time, I saw myself. By the end of the month, Birma Reyes Strategies was already making waves. We'd officially onboarded 2 major clients, one of them a direct competitor of Vanguard North. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same firm that once said I lacked executive presence was now sidelined, while I led strategy sessions with Fortune 500 leaders, confident, clear, and completely in control. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming space and redefining what leadership could look like, when it wasn't filtered through ego and gatekeeping. Still, something shifted when the first journalist called. The article's title, From Discarded to Disruptor, the woman who turned termination into a title. She had done her research, knew about the Darrotech contract, my quiet firing, even quoted internal memos that had somehow leaked. "I'm not here to start a fight," I told her over the phone, "but I am done pretending that what happened was normal." Because it wasn't. And I knew I wasn't the only one. When the piece went live, the response exploded. My inbox filled with messages, many from women, others from disillusioned professionals. This gave me the courage to speak up. Your story is mine. Same game, different names. I should have felt powerful, triumphant, but instead, I felt the weight of something deeper, because this wasn't just about me. It never had been. And now, the whole industry was watching. 2 days later, Dana called. "Vanguard's hired a crisis PR firm," she said. "They're trying to get ahead of it. I expect a statement any day now." "Let them," I replied. But it wasn't just a statement, it was a full-on campaign. A blog post. Moving forward, learning from the past, building stronger. It was corporate airbrushing at its finest. Vague words, euphemisms, no names, but the subtext was clear. And then, Evan re-emerged. A podcast interview, of course. "I think we live in an age where people are quick to assign blame," he said, voice smooth as ever. "Look, I've made mistakes. We all have. But not everyone is cut out for the pressure of leadership." That's what Evan said in his podcast interview. Smooth, calculated, almost sincere. Like sometimes people misinterpret tough decisions. It's just part of running a business. It was so perfectly rehearsed, I almost laughed. But what came next? Even I didn't expect. Just that night, I got a message request from someone I hadn't heard from in over a decade. Nina Rhodes, one of the original co-founders of Vanguard North. She'd retired before I was promoted to lead strategist, but her name still carried serious weight in the industry. Her message was brief. "Danielle, I've been following what's happening. I believe you. If you're open to it, I'd like to meet." We met the next morning at a quiet cafe in Denver's Capitol Hill district. She looked older, her hair silvered, but her posture still radiated quiet command. "I stepped down before Evan took full control," she told me. "I started seeing decisions I couldn't stand behind, but I never thought he'd drive it off the rails this fast." "You knew?" I asked. "I suspected," she admitted, "but I didn't dig deeper. I wasn't brave enough." There was no performance in her voice, just regret. "You weren't the only one he tried to erase," she continued. "You were just the first to hold him accountable." Then, from her bag, she handed me a flash drive. "These are board memos, internal evaluations, transcripts. From my final 6 months at Vanguard. They'll back up everything you've claimed if you decide to take this further." I took it, my hands suddenly cold. "Why now?" I asked. Nina looked me in the eye. "Because it's time the truth had more advocates than excuses, and because you reminded me what leadership should look like." We sat quietly, 2 women, 2 generations, different exits from the same flawed institution. That night, I opened the drive. She hadn't exaggerated. There were altered evaluations, meeting transcripts where Evan discussed layoffs as media diversions, and a file labeled "Restructure Plan. Quietly remove high-risk staff before IPO review." I wasn't a liability because of my performance. I was a liability because I knew too much. And because I'd asked too many questions. The next morning, I forwarded the entire contents of Nina's flash drive to Dana. Her response landed in my inbox just 3 minutes later. "We need to take this public. This isn't just about your story anymore, Danielle. This is systemic. Are you ready?" I stared at the message. Ready? No. Prepared? Absolutely. The decision wasn't made lightly. That weekend, Dana and I went through every document, every email, every time-stamped file, every altered performance review. We checked the accuracy of names, meeting dates, internal policy violations. We weren't just exposing misconduct, we were setting precedent. By Monday morning, the full story had been submitted to the Rocky Mountain Ledger, Denver's most respected investigative outlet, alongside an evidentiary folder of internal documents. Simultaneously, Dana filed a formal complaint with the Colorado Department of Labor and the SEC, citing intentional employee misrepresentation and deceptive disclosures to investors during review cycles. I thought I'd feel panic. Instead, I felt calm, clear, free. Within hours, the article went viral. Vanguard North accused of retaliation and fraudulent practices. Internal docs leak. From strategist to CEO, Daniel Reyes ignites industry reckoning. Just like that, I wasn't the woman who got fired. I was the woman who refused to disappear. My phone lit up for 3 straight days. Calls, texts, emails from journalists, ex-employees, and consultants from Seattle to Boston. Some called it brave. Others called it career suicide. But to me, it was necessary. On Wednesday morning, Anjali walked into my office with 2 coffees and a grin stretched across her face. "You broke the internet," she said, placing a cup in front of me. "I didn't mean to," I replied. "Exactly why it worked." She sat across from me. "How are you? Really?" I paused, exhaustive but strong. "I always knew you'd be the one to shake things up," she said quietly. "I just didn't expect this kind of ripple." She wasn't exaggerating. By the end of the week, 2 senior executives at Vanguard North had resigned. Anonymous sources confirmed. The board had known and chose silence. A former HR director stepped forward, on record, confirming systematic efforts at Vanguard North to downgrade performance reviews and suppress complaints. Their legal team issued a public statement promising a top-to-bottom restructuring. And Evan? Placed on immediate administrative leave. No press release, no podcast rebuttal. His LinkedIn bio disappeared overnight. No posts, no spin. Just silence. But I didn't gloat. Not even for a second. Because this was never about revenge. It was about recognition. For the quiet architects, the fixers, the behind-the-scenes problem solvers who got discarded the moment they outgrew the shadows. It was about rewriting the ending. For all of us. That Friday evening, Mira and I sat on the porch. Spring air drifted in, soft and warm, streaks of orange and violet curling through the sky. "Mom," she said, looking up from her phone. "You're on TV again." I chuckled. "I know. Getting tired of my face yet?" She leaned into me. "No, I think it's cool. You didn't let them treat you like you didn't matter." I kissed the top of her head, feeling the weight of her words, what it meant for her to see this, to believe this. Later that night, I sat at my desk reviewing an email from a university in Boston. They'd invited me to speak at their annual Women in Leadership Summit. The talk titled, "How to Be the Architect of Your Own Power." I said yes, not for the spotlight, but because the message mattered. The way things have always been doesn't mean that's how they have to stay. A month later, Vanguard North settled. Confidential financial resolution, public apology, 3 more executive resignations. More importantly, they agreed to install an independent ethics board, introduce quarterly transparency reports, implement new protections for employees. Well, it didn't fix everything, but it was a start. They offered a non-disclosure clause. I declined. If they thought they could buy my silence, they hadn't been paying attention. I remained CEO of Vermereya Strategies, now heading into its 2nd year, with a growing client list, a reputation built on ethics, and a line of talented people hoping to join. But most importantly, I stayed visible. Because stories like mine matter only when they're told, or when they remind others, you're not alone. Silence isn't the price of survival, and you get to decide when your story ends. As for me, this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. I didn't share my story for sympathy. I shared it because someone needs to. Because I spent too many years being told to stay quiet, to play nice, to be grateful for scraps. And maybe you've been told the same thing. At your job, in your family, in spaces where your voice was needed but never welcomed. So here's my ask to you. Support the ones who build quietly. Speak up in the comments. Share what part of this story reminded you of your own. Let's turn this from a moment into a movement. Because I promise you, I'm not the only Danielle out there, and neither are you. To anyone who's ever been overlooked, undervalued, or underestimated, don't let someone else's definition of your worth become your truth. Document everything, speak when it matters, walk away when it's time, and never, never let fear be the reason you settle. If this story moved you, let me know. If it made you remember a time you stayed quiet when you should have spoken up, you still have time to change that. And if you're standing on the edge of a decision, wondering if you're ready to lead, let me say this clearly. You are. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment, share your experience, tell me what resonated, not because I need the affirmation, but because we need to remind each other we're not alone. And if you want more stories like this, of courage, clarity, and reclaiming power, subscribe to the channel. This isn't the end of the conversation. It's only the beginning. Let's keep building. Together.